When historians take a look at this decade, they'll realize that it was a period of fundamental change. My role is not to look at history, but rather what are the opportunities that'll open up in the decades ahead. So I'm going to take you on a journey into the next 10 or 15 years, giving you a view of what's going to happen on a geopolitical base, from a demographic perspective, as well as how the world will unlock based on economic regimes. And then we're going to talk about the impact this will have on your industry. So without further ado, we always start with a quote, the quote of William Gibson: "The future already happened. It is just unequally distributed." It's very interesting, and you're very lucky that you're not one of my MBA students, because I keep them busy on this quote for at least half an hour. But the weak signals that appear around us on a day-to-day basis sometimes have got a profound impact on our future. That, however, doesn't mean that we should negate the trends that do shape our world, that everyone agrees upon. So when we look at the future, we look at it through three perspectives. Perspective one, what are the major megatrends shaping our world? And that's where we explore the future, the trends that are equally distributed. Secondly, we take a look at the weak signals and ask ourselves which of these weak signals can unlock brand new business opportunities. In a way, how can you as entrepreneurs, managers, executives harness these technologies to shape or create the future? That's where the weak signals come in. And then we need to know the future isn't as predictable as we think. It's a complex adaptive system. And to navigate in this space, you need a deeper insight into the world of complex adaptive systems. Unfortunately, we're not going to touch on that one today. So, without further ado, let's get started and talk about what are the major megatrends that will shape our world, and specifically how it will impact our agenda, namely the megatrends. What are the new payment rails that will redefine the competitive landscape internationally? We're going to take a look at the post-quantum world, the impact that will have on cybersecurity, and we'll touch on artificial intelligence. I mean, any keynote do need to have some elements of AI in it. If we look at today's news headlines, they're but mere surface ripples of far deeper ocean currents. And as a futurist, and you as an executive or manager, need to understand that these headlines are all connected via major forces underneath the current. You need to identify when these currents change course, and even more important, when they collide. So let's go take a look at the megatrends which will shape our world. And firstly, we need to talk about the demographics. In Africa, we estimate to grow our population on this continent from 1.2 billion people to, guess what, 3.6 billion people by the year 2100. A threefold increase in the population numbers on this continent alone. And if we take a look at that purple line you see on the screen, that's Africa's trajectory. Now, a lot of people say, but is there enough space for everyone in Africa? Well, if we look at what the world will look like, you'll see that Africa will play a dominant role in world politics linked to its populations. But Africa looks quite small on this flat map, and when I was a young kid at primary school, I asked my lecturer, why do you call Australia a continent and Greenland an island? And he said, you know, Mr. Geldenhuys, I don't think he called me that, but something to that nature. And he said, you know, the earth isn't flat. I said, I know that. He says, and if you look at the globe, you'll see Greenland is quite small and Australia is quite big, because all the continents closer to the poles seem to be bigger. Africa is an enormous continent. Within Africa, you can fit in China and India and the United States of America, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Japan, and the United Kingdom. It's a massive continent. So don't worry about space. Our problem is, what will our growing population lead to? And we are seeing growing populations in India and Turkey, but the real problem is really the continents of Europe, some of the countries in Asia, and how their population pyramids have inverted. And this is what Italy looks like today. huge amount of debt. Those that are working in those economies are burdened by a huge amount of taxes, and that means they leave the country. So we have a demographic death spiral. We're seeing this across the continent. You can see that by 2000, the death rate surpassed the birth rate, and fortunately, that won't happen to South Africa for the last 80 years. But we are seeing the same movie playing out in Europe, in Germany. We're seeing it playing out in Japan, in South Korea. In Japan, they are selling more adult nappies than baby nappies today. And by 2050, there will be 3 times the amount of pensioners than those below the age of 18. So very, very concerning, because of the largest economies in the world, we have declining population. And you can already see it's already having impact on our world. The most important thing is, well, we always have China. I mean, maybe they can help us to unlock new opportunities. Because if not, we might have to get security dogs like in South Korea or waiters like in Japan due to a lack of people. But unfortunately, the Chinese, with their one-child policy, meant that they will not be the consumers of the next century. The Chinese population will fall by 50% by 2100. And that is unbelievably concerning. So this means that most of the richest economies in the world are not having kids anymore, to the extent they were in previous decades. On the one end of the scale, we've got declining birth rates. At the other end of the scale, people are growing to an older age. And this has a huge burden on those young taxpayers. And the key problem that we face is this, that most of the consumption happens here. Once your kids, if you're lucky enough to move out of the house, you stop spending as much money and you withdraw your money from the economy. So normally at age 55, you put your money into savings account, pension funds. And that's where Europe is right now. That is where Japan is right now. That is where South Korea is right now. And when the world consumes less, they buy less. And Africa, that exports a lot of goods internationally, will face some serious concerns in the next 10 years due to a decline in consumption. Trend number 1, demographic divergence having a huge impact around the globe, and it will have a huge impact on the African continent. The second key element we're going to be looking at is geopolitics. There's one country I didn't mention, the United States of America. Why? Because they will only see decline from about 2045 onwards in terms of the growth rate. They'll still grow as a nation, but they won't grow as fast. And the United States knows it. They are one of the last large economies with sufficient consumption, and that's why they put up trade barriers, because everyone wants to trade with them. A bunch of rich Americans to trade with, and they are one of the only countries with a healthy population growth for the time being until about 2045. This is what the world looks like if you take the USA out of the picture. And this is what some of the scenarios might look like, with United States growing by about 40% by 2100, and most of the richer countries declining to about 50% of their current size. Our current world order is based on Bretton Woods, the agreement they made at the end of the Second World War, where the dollar was really the dominant currency that defines global trade. And the problem is that America based that on security. This was the oil flow from the Middle East to America by 2007. This was the picture by 2015, and this was the picture by 2020. America became energy self-sufficient due to fracking. So they've got enough food to export to the rest of the world. They don't have a security problem, and they don't have an energy security problem. And the question they're asking now is, seeing that we had Bretton Woods from a security perspective, we bribed a lot of countries to stand against us, against the Soviet Union. Hey, guess what? The Soviet Union isn't there anymore. And if you look at America's trade, their physical export of goods, it's about 13% of their economy. The internal economy is so strong that imports and exports, physical goods, only account to about 13% of their economy. If you take Mexico and Canada out of the equation, it drops to 5%. So America's asking, why do I need to have 200 Corvettes to keep the world safe if the amount of money I make from physical export isn't that big? And that's why we've entered an era of deglobalization. an era where America is no longer protecting the seas, and we might actually see a lot of piracy in years ahead as we start seeing a whole new security environment opening up. So America is also saying, hey, get out of the rest of the world. So it's not only based on economics, but on politics as well. We're also seeing fundamental changes in China, where China has played a new game of opening up trade routes across Asia and into Europe, called the New Silk Road, or the Belt and Road Initiative. And the most important thing for you, the new way in order to settle international trade, the e-yuan, which we'll talk about momentarily. Another very important thing we need to talk about is a change of season. Fundamental changes happen in society every now and again, and one of the most fundamental changes is a move towards the fourth turning. Every one of these seasons takes about 25 to 30 years, and it plays out across human history. We've now entered the fourth turning. Now, if you wonder what the fourth turning is, it's all based on generational theory. And I think one of the best quotes was the founder of Dubai. A journalist asked him, what car will your grandson drive one day? And he said, well, my father wasn't a camel, my grandfather as well. I drive a Mercedes. My son drives a Land Rover, and his son will drive a Land Rover. I don't know why, but my great-grandson will be back on a camel. And this is profound. Hard times create strong men, 25, 30 years. Strong men create good times, 25, 30 years, and wealth is generated and created. Good times create weak men that use the wealth of the previous generation. And then we end up in a situation where weak men create hard times, 25, 30 years. The benefit is there's always a cycle to look forward to. And if you look at the world around you, collapsing infrastructure, conflict between political parties, the middle of the political spectrum disappearing, and you have just opposing views from left and right. No one agrees how to take a country forward, like we're seeing in Europe and in America. This is what is called the fourth turning. And that's why you always have this debate around the debt in America, why you have the amount of challenges like government shutdowns. You've seen we've entered the fourth turning due to this conflict that we see in a political space. The political changes is one thing, social change is another, but we also see a reflection within economic regimes linked to these social changes. If we take a look at the Second World War, First War, Second World War, this was the crisis. Then the first phase, and if you look at the four factors of production, maybe labor, capital, land, and technology, we've seen that the first phase was labor-led. Any system has inconsistencies built into it, and over time it breaks the system and a new system emerges. When the growth of the labor unions in Britain that led to the fall of their car manufacturing sector became too much, the same story in the USA, they decided we need a new way to grow our economy, and they chose a capital-led growth period. This is where we focused on China, which became part of the Western ecosystem, and we used them as a low-cost manufacturer. Capital. Well, in 2007, we thought, okay, new reset is coming. No, we put the patient on steroids. We called it quantitative easing. But the real change happened by 2020 when we started focusing on deglobalization and homeland economics. So you can see how social change have an impact on your economic regimes as well. Debt is going to be one of the key challenges everyone's going to talk about, the big elephant in the room. This is the height of US dollar bills. If you take $100 bills and you stack them, they will reach a height of 43,000 kilometers. That is 40 trillion US dollars that America somehow has to pay back. And they are not paying it back. They're just borrowing more and borrowing more with the hope that the taxpayer will one day pay that money back. And we're also seeing for the first time in history that American debt has now been downgraded due to these concerns around their sovereignty. So this was a picture 2 years ago, $31 trillion in debt in America. This is a picture I took yesterday. It's now at 39 trillion. We expect $40 trillion debt. And if you look at that in terms of seconds, 1 trillion second is about 32,000 years. That just ought to give you an idea about the amount of debt that America is facing. So the problem we're facing is that no sovereign countries are keeping American debt anymore. When you want to settle international trade, in the past, one of the most liquid ways in which to transfer money was US government bonds. It was highly liquid, very, very easy to trade, and there was trust in it because of the strength of the American economy. But now, with a world with declining taxpayers, with increasing debt, questions are rightly being asked: should governments keep American debt? And you can see over the last 15 years the decline of foreign governments holding American debt. So the question is, what will America do to replace foreign governments? And that was where the Genius Act came in, slowly but surely. No one noticed. Whenever you create a digital version of the dollar, a stable currency, so a cryptocurrency based on the dollar, your back end, based on regulations and laws, is that they force these companies to buy American debt. So you can't use dollars as a backstop. You need to use American debt as a backstop for you to offer a digital dollar. So they are using anyone that uses a digital dollar in the cybersphere as a owner of American debt. Very interesting, isn't it? One of the key challenges of American debt is there's a couple of ways to do it. I can stop paying it back. I can spend less. That's impossible for a politician. I can raise taxes. But if you know the Laffer curve, you know that if you raise taxes, you actually get less money back if you're already past the Laffer curve. So that doesn't help. So what's the only way you can do it? You devalue the purchasing power of the currency, then you borrow money, you pay it back 20 years later, but then you pay back far less because the currency had been devalued. And most people don't realize if their purchasing power disappears by about 2% each year. But each generation do notice. This was the number of baby boomers that owned a house at age 35 and at age 40. One generation later, that's the amount of Generation X's that owned a house at 35 and 40. This is the new generation. And their figure is about 10%. Do you see how government debt have devalued the purchasing power of currency and how young people can no longer afford to buy a house? And if anyone says, I hope the government can come in and do something, I know, what the hell are you talking about? Because every time they borrow money, they take away the purchasing power of your money as well as your kids' money one day. And that's unfortunately the situation we find ourselves in all around the world. What does this lead to? Well, a question is now rightly being asked. Should we use government debt as our foundation of international trade? Or should we use a shiny metal backed by a cryptocurrency? And this is the new fight on the ecosystem, the fight between the US dollar and the e-yuan. So there's a literal proliferation in payment rails adoption around the world. And one of the biggest one is the e-yuan, backed by a cryptocurrency capability or a central bank cryptocurrency with permissioned blockchain. That means not anyone has access to the blockchain, only certain parties around it. But it means that I can make a payment in milliseconds. And it's now backed by gold. I can take this digital yuan and swap it with real gold at any point in time. People said, hold on, Peter, where will the gold be held? I said, well, in Hong Kong or Beijing. And most of the countries around the world said, no, we don't like that one. We will perhaps go with your approach if the gold is kept in certain vaults all around the world. And this is what the new blockchain looks like. So we have gold vaults in Brazil, in Russia, in India, very soon in some of the Middle Eastern countries. And whenever you want to take your digital yuan and you want to literally extract its real value, you can get physical gold for it. Very, very interesting to see where this new era is taking us. It's not that you're going to swap this currency for gold. We're going to use it as a trade mechanism in order to facilitate change. Now, the SWIFT network that the world have been using for quite some time is creaking under the strain, and we are seeing that Project Agora is the Western approach to try and counter this new initiative. And you can look that up after the course. So in essence, banks around the world that trades with both China and the West will have to come up to this very interesting challenge around this duopoly, this dual liquidity funnel, where perhaps the dollars might be for now a longer term holder of value, but in terms of efficiency of trade, the digital yuan or the BRICS payment mechanism might actually be a far better bet. So some interesting changes that will happen from a payment rail perspective. I promised you that we're going to talk a little bit about cybersecurity, and one of the challenges we face with cybersecurity is what we call the quantum era, where quantum computers can crack our established security protocols literally within days. So the private and public key ecosystem based on prime numbers that you multiply with each other, that normally held for about 20 years, a quantum computer can crack that in about 3 days. So one of the approaches, and there are multiple ones, but one of the approaches is to fight it utilizing the world of the quantum, or quantum entanglement. Now, quantum entanglement is where you take two particles, you entangle them, and they become aware of each other. And if you split them over a distance, they're still aware of each other. This is like weird. How does it work? They showed it to Einstein, and Einstein's most profound statement, the most intelligent physicist at that point in time, did you know how he defined it? Spooky action at a distance. And this is literally what it boils down to. Two particles at a subatomic level being literally intertwined. They become entangled. And once they become entangled, they become aware of each other's position. Now, below the Planck constant, you can't accurately depict the exact location of an electron, but taking multiple snapshots, you can, from a statistical perspective, determine where those locations are. And here you can literally see these two particles being aware of each other, even although they are separated over space. So why don't we use this technology to enable a brand new ecosystem? And that's exactly what the world have done for the last 20 years. It is called quantum key distribution, where you take two particles, you entangle them, and you exchange the security keys every single day. The challenge you have is, do you know if someone's listening in and actually intercepting the key? And that's why you will entangle your encryption keys early in the morning. Send them out, and the moment someone interacts with a transmission, the entanglement gets broken. And then you know you can't trust this key. We might have to transmit it via another way. The Chinese have been busy with this technology since 2004. They've done it over more than 1,000 hops on fiber optic networks, and it is now part of the 6G network that will appear by 2030. So you can transmit these keys via your 6G ecosystem as well. And that is one of the wonderful new tools that will become available in years ahead to act against cybersecurity attacks. So, from a cybersecurity perspective, we need to talk about artificial intelligence. And you know what artificial intelligence can do in running penetration tests at a speed that surpasses human interaction. So we really need to be quite careful in terms of how we use AI from a cybersecurity perspective, but also how we use it in our organizations. This is the AI value chain, from the NVIDIA chips they make to the hyperclusters to the models that is used. And Copilot doesn't have their own model. They will actually use either OpenAI or the Claude models, and I think that will be Apple's position as well. It's very interesting what the AI value chain will do in the future. So if we compare the current ecosystem around software, around the ecosystem around artificial intelligence, we see a completely different pyramid. In the past, most of the money went into software companies, Microsoft, Google, because the computing power was in abundance and that wasn't really important. But now we're using so much computer power. On a computer system where you use instructions and data, the use of hardware resources is really quite small. However, every time you run a query on an artificial intelligence model, it's the hardware that takes the biggest brunt. And that's why you see most of the money going into chips, not yet into software. So what that means is that there are a number of companies strategically positioned quite well to harness the opportunities of the future. We're seeing that Anthropic is now going public, as well as OpenAI. But very interesting, the positioning of Google. And if there's a strategic partnership between Microsoft and Anthropic, or even with Apple and Anthropic, some very interesting opportunities will emerge in the next couple of weeks. Very important is how AI will change our idea of work. This is the document published by Anthropic, so take it from where it comes. But it's very interesting that careers that require exact documentation, legal contracts, financial reports, software, those are the careers most impacted by artificial intelligence. Because we know what the outcome is, and we can ask our AI agents to do recurring loops to give us that exact output. It's the careers with uncertainty, like write me a brilliant business plan, which can be quite innovative and quite inspiring without having one unique key factor. And one of the important things we need to realize is that AI will change our world. Now, the Economist magazine did an interesting study. They say 30% of your tasks could be replaced by AI. But that means 70% of what you do can't be replaced by AI. And that's the 70% becomes more valuable. But you need to use the other 30% skills in AI to make your world more efficient. Now, AI is what we call a general purpose technology. It impacts every single aspect of society, similar to previous generations. Like the horse-dung crisis in 1994, what was the solution with our old mindset? A mechanical horse. Didn't work well. When we exchanged the steam spindles with electricity, no increase in productivity. Only 20 years later, when they changed the layout of the plant, did we see productivity emerge. So the question is, how do we approach AI to generate competitive advantage for our organizations? It's all about ontologies. The ontology of predictability, cause and effect is predictable and repeatable, like this. Or I launch a marketing plan in one country and I launch it in another country, but I get completely different results. The impact of human complexity. Understand the differences in ontologies, where the one is best practice and the other one is complex. But what if we can take all complex and complicated actions and we can model it in a digital twin? What does that mean? That means we can mimic any single scenario that might happen. The competitive advantage of companies is no longer preparing or predicting the future. It is how quickly do you react when that future happens to you. And this is what companies like Palantir as well as Snowflake are currently doing, creating scenarios that give you a blueprint how to react, whatever may happen to you. And this is what unlocks the real value of artificial intelligence from a strategic perspective in the future. So, lastly, let me wrap up on a couple of key insights. Have any of you ever seen a truck delivering a traffic light in your lives before? No, I haven't. I'm on this planet for close to 56 odd years. I've never seen a truck delivering a traffic light. This is a Tesla driving in the middle of nowhere. Think between Bloemfontein and Welkom. There you go, you drive, and suddenly these traffic lights appear out of nowhere. What the hell's going on? Oh, it's a truck with a traffic light. You see, the artificial intelligence have never been exposed to a traffic light and a truck that merge. We as humans can extrapolate. We can take any two constructs and merge them in our heads. We immediately know what it's like. Even although you've never seen a truck delivering a traffic light in your life, as a human, you immediately know what it is. Not so for artificial intelligence. AI can only interpolate. It can only create relationships on things it has been trained on. And that's the difference between human thinking and artificial intelligence thinking. This idea of Frankencode, where you go around and you grab code to create code, that was cool for a year. But then we said maybe we shouldn't let the AI agent just grab any code. Why don't we guide it utilizing agents? Here's my AI, it doesn't know what to do. Well, similar to Trinity in the Matrix, it says, do you know how to fly that helicopter? No, I don't, but let me quickly download it and I'll show you how. And that's exactly what Claude is doing. So when you ask Claude to analyze a PowerPoint presentation or write a report, it downloads the skill it needs and then gives you a result because it iterates until the result is met. Agentic AI is about defining the output. Prompt engineering was defining the input. That's the difference between these two domains. And that's why in this complex space of changes, AI will take the bird flock back and say, hey, bird flock, you created something interesting and unpredictable, but you didn't end up in the right location. Now go back and do it again. And that's literally what agentic AI is doing. The last part is just briefly where India, China, and America innovates, Europe regulate. So Europe was first with the EU AI Act. And what you need to realize is they came up with 4 levels of security risk. Minimal, limited, high, and unacceptable risks, and a timeline that will flow over the next few years. But this EU Act will have a huge impact on the financial industry. And even if your clients are in the European Union, you will have to adhere to them. And a number of them are quite concerning, like credit scoring. You can't let AI just do credit scoring. And they have huge fines that you will pay, for example, if you discriminate against people utilizing AI models. From a cybersecurity perspective, it'll have a huge implication. And if you're worried, these slides I will make available at the end of my presentation so that you have an ability to see where the impact will be from a cybersecurity perspective. But before the lights start flashing, let me talk about what you can do right now as my last slide. Firstly, in order to adhere to these acts, and it also will happen in South Africa, build an AI inventory, be very clear what's the risk level that your AI project works on. Secondly, clarify your role. Are you a provider, a deployer, or an importer? And then literally document every single thing you do, because your trail of documentation will have an impact on possible fines you might have to pay in the future. Also important, make sure that you have roles within the organization with human oversight that manage this, because this will have a huge impact once it gets promulgated. And finally, look at the overlaps between cybersecurity, your NIS2 systems, your privacy documentation, as well as artificial intelligence. I will make the slide deck available for you afterwards, but let's wrap up. From a world of megatrends where everything around us is changing, from geopolitics, demographics to economic regimes, we've entered a new technological era, an era of new payment rails, where you in the banking industry will have to make very important choices where you're going to develop your payment rails and the infrastructure around it. Cybersecurity will become a huge problem with a quantum era. Look at the latest introductions of cybersecurity preventative measures. And finally, be aware of the EU Act from Europe, opening up brand new opportunities and threats. But my final message is, we're at the cusp of a productivity revolution. So embrace the new AI tools. Go and play with it every single night, and you will be amazed at how it will enhance your jobs so that the 30% that can be automated by AI will give you enough time for the 70% to reach the heights that you want to reach in your careers. Thank you so much for your time.